Hello, folks. Been a while. I've been a little busy, but I've had a whole lot of stuff going on at the same time. So this is a video of a explanation of what actually happened to Vanilla Ice. All right. So we took it apart. We meaning me. I took it apart. I pulled it out of the car. I'm sure if you've seen my Instagram, you've seen pictures of me out in the driveway with the engine hoist, taking it out by myself. So yes, I took the engine out of the car by myself. Got it on the stand, got it in here, and I found the machine shop. So actually, the guy that's doing the work on the new engine lives right down the street from me. I didn't even know he was there. But now that I do know he's there, that's my guy. It's my dude now. So, back to the dismantling part. Took everything off of it after I found my guy. And I got everything is back there on the toolbox. Heads, intake, the oil pan, everything. I stripped it all the way down to just the crank and pistons in the block. So I get it over there to him. And it's on the back of my truck. And so he's got a hoist outside. He picks it up and he looks up under the bottom of it and he says, "Oh, I can tell this thing ain't even been touched." Now, this goes back to where you trust your machine shop guy. Now, granted, I don't know this guy, and that's my problem with a lot of things that go on in the automotive world. You got people who will rip you off. Some of them who don't really care, and it's not really a rip-off thing. They don't really care if it blows up or not. They don't. It's not important. And even if you do blow it up and you show up, what are you going to do? You can't make anybody do anything. You know how hard it is to sue somebody these days and prove that, they blew up your motor or whatever. It's more of a hassle than anything. And so we'll move forward in that, but I'll give you a description of what happened. So he took the motor apart, calls me a week later, says, "I got some bad news." I said, "All right, what we doing?" Because see, I just assumed that since it wasn't balanced, that all he had to do was take the crank out, take the pistons out, balance the crank and pistons, and put them back in. Now, this was aside from any other operations that he would do, checking the block and all those things, making sure that it wasn't cracked and that kind of thing. And here's where the problem comes in at. So the crank was fine. It had a little mark on it, but nothing that wouldn't polish out. It's fixable. The block, no. This mug, and this is being using language that's clean. The second, third, and fourth mains were cracked. Now, this is just from me cranking it and letting it run. I never drove it. I never drove the car. I never drove it down the road. I cranked it up in the driveway. Now, when I got it home, here's the rundown of that. It fired off 3-4 times, and then I went out one day and it wouldn't start. It wouldn't start. So I put a fuel pump in it. The fuel pump wouldn't come on. Okay. No big deal. Put a fuel pump in it, it fired up. Okay, that was my problem. Nope. It fired up, it ran for a couple weeks, and then the computer went out. Now, didn't know the computer went out because it's not something that normally happens to those cars. It's just, you get the whole the module on the distributor. That's usually the culprit when they will just turn over. They'll just turn over and nothing is happening. And you're like, okay. And a lot of people will go, well, the timing chain spun. No, not if it's brand new. It's got a brand new timing chain in it, so it ain't got any slack in it. That's not the problem. So another guy I know, he doesn't live here anymore. He lives in Alabama now. But I called him, and he's a Mustang guy, and I try to surround myself with people who have had more experience and more problems, so that if I tell them about a problem, they know exactly what I'm talking about. So I said, hey man, this is what it's doing. He said, you check the computer? I said, no. I said, open it up and look for this green diode, and if it's leaking, there's your culprit. That was my culprit. Opened it up, it was bad. Not to mention that somebody had opened it up before, and I think maybe it might have had a chip in it or something like that. And they had that because the factory cover, the tape over it was gone. Somebody had put some duct tape on it. But anyway, aside from all of that, the second, third, and fourth mains were cracked. They had cracked them. Granted, if I had kept running it and, just didn't pay attention. Now, granted, you couldn't miss that it shook. Now, granted, just sitting there idling, it didn't shake. But as soon as you gave it a little gas, it shook. It shook bad, and that's why it cracked the mains. It shot. The block shot. Fast forward to a week later. I was like, well, I wasn't expecting the block to be cracked. Now, I took this motor out of 65, but it needs to be machined. It needs all of that, and it still got the crank in it. I was like, no, I'm not doing that. So I commenced to looking for a block. I found one. Another guy I know, good man, Mr. the Hoffman. He brought me a fresh, unmolested, unmachined, stock block, 5-liter block. So, all right. Brought it to me the same day. Said, hey, man, I got one. Oh, yeah? When can you bring it to me? I'll bring it to you right now. Oh, okay. He brought it to me. I took it over there. He looked at it. He said, oh, this is good. This is fresh. It ain't never been touched. I said, uh-huh. So that's where we are now. We are officially at that point of waiting on machine work and that thing. And he's an older fella. So he's like, look here, I'll let you know I'm kind of old and you ain't in a hurry, are you? And I'm like, no. In a hurry for what? Be in a hurry to do what? I mean, what? In a hurry now? I was in a hurry when I put it together. I made plenty of mistakes putting it together because I was in a hurry. So, being that was my first attempt, I learned some things, and that's what it is. It's a learning process. This whole thing with, unless you just let somebody do it for you, let somebody just put the whole motor together, and you'll never learn nothing unless you just don't want to learn anything. I mean, that's up to you. Me personally, I want to know as much as possible. That way, I can do as much as possible, and it costs me less money. Now, granted, I ain't a machinist. I have no kind of machinery around here to do any of that. So I would take that to somebody that knows what they're doing, and then let them do their thing, and then I'll put it back together, and then I'll put it in the car. See, I know that much. So I know how to assemble. I know how to disassemble. But that's about that's about as far as it goes. And a lot of us who are inept at thinking say, you know what? I'm not going to perform brain surgery on myself. I would let somebody who knows what they're doing do it. Now, granted, uh, there are steps one could take, but let's be realistic. I'm not a medical professional. I'm not even going to go there. I'm going to let them do what they do, and I just have to trust them. Well, it's the same thing with a machinist. I'm going to let him do what he does. I have found that he has proven that he is the best at what he does. He was referred to me by Formalized TV, my man Ryan Martin. Good man. Ryan Martin is a very knowledgeable individual. He's younger than me, but you know what? The dude has got dirty hands. When I say dirty hands, I mean that dude has wrenches for fingers. When I say that, he's probably had his hands on all kinds of stuff. He knows all kinds of stuff. And there was only one other person I remember who was that smart, but he was a Ford guy. Now, granted, he worked on General Motors too, but he was a Mustang guy through and through. He's no longer with us. I'll mention his name, and anybody that knows me and watches this channel knows what I'm talking about when I say Bobby. No. Bob was the dude. Dude knew part numbers. Dude could just rattle off the part number on the computer, part number on the heads. I mean, this cat just knew stuff. I don't know if he slept in the Ford catalog or he came out the womb with 5.0 stamped on his skull. I don't know. All I know is the dude knew what he was talking about, and he could listen to something and tell you what was wrong with it. He was that good. Now, granted, I've been working on cars for a while, and I've been learning stuff for a while. And now, granted, I always wasn't a Ford guy. My dad was a Chevrolet man. I mean, you see what I got out there in the garage. The Pontiac thing, that was his attempt to bring the car back to Pontiac specs. Now, granted, it'll never be that. It was a sprint car, so I got to bring it up to V8 car specs before I can even do anything to it. That's another story. Back to the Vanilla Ice. So right now, we're at the machine shop. We get it back. Plan is to put it back together slowly. Once I put it back together, it will never come back apart. He already guaranteed me that it'd be once he puts his hands on it, he's like a magician. I'll never go back in it again. And it's a street car, so I'm not gonna beat on it like a race car because it's not a race car. Remember that. You think about that when you're building a car. This was my old man's philosophy. He said, look, you got to figure out what you want to do with it and how much money you're going to put in it to do what it is you want it to do. If you're going to go racing, it's a race car. Don't give me that garbage of, oh, it's a race car / street car. No, it'll stay broke all the time. And it'll stay broke more than you drive it. That means it's a race car. Because if you beat on it and it breaks, it's a race car. And you ain't put enough money in. You cheaped out somewhere, you bought cheap parts here or there. A race car has got the best of everything in it that you can afford. You can afford. Because your pocket and Joe Blow's pocket ain't the same. And I can't go racing. Number one, I ain't got time for that. Number two, to build a race motor, I probably could build a bracket motor. It'll run 10s or high 9s. And if it ran that all day long, that's all it would do. But there's no fun in that. That's another story. It would eventually become boring because what's fast now, slow tomorrow. I'm just saying, we in 2024. Ain't nobody really everybody wants to run outlaw and heads up and that kind of thing, and put a turbo on their car and big superchargers and that kind of thing. And nobody's running naturally aspirated motors, except for old guys. You know, I was watching a little YouTube action of these guys that build these cars from the 80s. You know, they had 671, 871 blowers on them. And that was the thing back then. Blowers sticking out of the hood. Now, that's not the thing. The thing is side exhaust, exit exhaust out the front fender with twin turbos under the hood. Yeah. Drive it all around. Drive it anywhere. No problem breaking down. If you do burn up anything, you probably didn't get the air-fuel ratio right, burn a hole in the piston. But hey, that's another story. Back to the discussion at hand. So, we get it back, put it back together, put it back in the car, and we'll move on from there. Granted, there's some more suspension work needs to be done to the car, preferably the rear end. Now, granted, it'll hold up with what the motor's got in it. It ain't. That's not the problem. The problem is the side-to-side action. Now, the machine, the black car that my son drives, the 98 Cobra, it has no side-to-side action, which means if I go out there and I shake the car, there is no shimmy in it. There is no up and down. There's no nothing. It's solid. I changed everything about that car, everything under it. So it's got brand new shocks, brakes, all that, drilled and slotted rotors, blah, 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 blah. I thought about what the car should run like and what it should stop like before I ever gave any notion of what it looks like. Because it doesn't matter what it looks like. It doesn't matter if it ain't got any paint on it. It's what's under it. Does it stop well? Does it sound good? Is it fast? It's fast enough for him. You know. The idea is that there's no shimmy in it. So I probably need to replace upper and lower control arms. Maybe I'll go to some coilovers or something. Something to make the car solid all the way around, 360 degrees. But it's not a drag race car. It's not set up for that. I like spirited driving, you know, like curves, canyons, freeway driving. I like a road car, not a 8-second, 6-second car. Now, granted, they sound mean, and that's great, and I like the way they sound and all that, but it's only going to run 6 seconds, and then they cut it off. I want to hear my sound all the time. I get in it. I'm going to the store in it. I'm going to my sister's house. I'm going to visit my mom. I'm driving this thing all the way around, and I'm going to prove that that's what's going to happen. I'm going to drive it. I'm going to drive it until I can't drive it anymore. That's the goal. Same thing with Big Sister. Drive it until I can't drive it anymore. So that's my update as far as Big Sister goes. Hopefully this weekend, me and the two Curtises will put the motor in the car. We get it in, and that's one less thing we have to worry about. Then the process begins with assembly. Put the headers in it, get the headers on, get everything locked down, so forth and so on. And I'll do an update on that when we get the motor in and set in. I'll get some pictures of that. And you can go to the Instagram, Hitman, and Instagram.com or whatever, Hitman. You know where it's at. Anyway, you go look and see the progress that's been made with that. We'll see how far we can get with that. I won't worry about what it looks like later. We just want to get it rolling. I know you see all of this, and I'll get to that soon. I got a few videos that I made on this room and all the Hot Wheels in it. All of them made Hot Wheels. Some of them are Johnny Lightnings, but anyway, that's my update. And y'all be cool and keep between the ditches. I'll see y'all on the road. Honk if you see me.